Hi, welcome back to Roda 360. Most PhD content online assume that doctoral students have a particular version of themselves. A 20-something-year-old living alone, single, staying in a flat close to the campus, whole world organized around one big thing, and that's the thesis. For me, that was never my story. And I know that that's not the story of so many people. I'm not a full time student in a library with nothing else to do. I'm a full time student, yes, but then I don't sleep in the library like I used to do during my master's. I have a career history. I'm building a platform and I have a family. And all these are happening in tandem or parallel to the PhD. So if you are someone going through all this, then this episode is for you. Welcome back to Rhoda 360. My name is Rhoda, and this is part of our PhD Truth series. And we've covered funding, admission, applications. We've talked about imposter syndrome, well-being individually. Um, Today, I want to talk about how everything, all of it, money, time, identity, presence, everything actually like fits together into one real whole life. And that is a 360. Yeah. Because a PhD does not happen in isolation from everything else that you are. A PhD happens inside the life that you are, a life that is still going on even while you're doing it. So let's talk about how to hold both or how to hold everything together as a whole person. There's a quiet myth in academic culture that serious doctoral student is someone with nothing else going on in their life. Total devotion, total focus, anything else treated as a distraction from the real world. While that may be true for some people or in some directions, I want to push back on that directly because I think that what that does is real damage to people whose life simply does not look like that. And quite frankly, I think it's too narrow of a model, of what serious research even requires. For instance, I'm a pharmacist. I have years of experience in clinical practice, pharmaceutical brand management, even regulatory affairs. And here am I building Roda 360 as a genuine platform and not just as a hobby, although I love podcasting. And I'm doing a PhD, I'm building a family, I have a young family. And all this happening at the same time, in the same life, in the same 24 hours that we all have. That doesn't make my research less serious. If anything, the professional experience I bring sharpens my research. It sharpens my instincts in more ways that a singular academic path might not have, right? The version of serious or seriousness that requires erasing everything else about yourself is not actually about rigor. Sometimes it's about a particular traditional model of what a doctoral student should look like. And that's why most people finish PhD or some postgraduate studies and feel like they are unfulfilled because they have not done anything else apart from this one. So let's talk about time. Let's get more practical about time because, there's this vague encouragement to find balance, which has worked for some people. But what has actually worked for me is structure, developing structure. I protect my time blocks, not days. I don't think in terms of this is my PhD day, like they do on Instagram. It's a life in a day in the life of a PhD student. Or this is my Roda 360 day, because I understand that real life does not respect those tidy, neat categories. Instead, I protect specific blocks of focused time within each day, and I am ruthless about what goes into each block. I match similar types of work, research, reading, writing in one stretch. Content scripting, I have about 10 content right now that I've scripted in a blocked time. Content scripting, recording like I'm doing now, email and scheduling, all those in batching on their own in a particular window rather than scatter throughout the day, which interrupts like deep focus. Because I've had to accept that for some weeks, one priority pulls more weight than another. Some weeks, the PhD genuinely needs more hours. For instance, when there's a deadline, when there's a milestone, when there's a particular demanding piece of writing. Other weeks, this platform, Roda 360, needs more attention. Like when there's a launch, I'm preparing for an interview next week. I'm developing a series like this. I've stopped expecting every single week to be perfect or evenly balanced, because the balance happens across months, not within any week or any day. And I'm honest about what does not fit, right? I'm honest about saying no to some opportunities right now, some commitments, even to some people. I have said no. I said no. In fact, I said my last no last night, right, to someone. And it's an uncomfortable skill, but it's necessary. And this life in this season has really taught me to say no positively for me. So let's talk about money. Money. We've talked about scholarships and side incomes in this series in detail. What I want to add here is how I think about money as one integrated picture rather than separate buckets. Now, your scholarship can cover a foundation. Any casual work you take can cover a gap. For instance, on Roda 360, while it's still in its early stages, it represents something different, not just income, but an asset that compounds over time, that builds value, whether or not I'm actively earning from it in any given month. I think this distinction matters for anyone building life outside a PhD, not just income to survive the next month or the next semester. Some of what you do should simply pay the bills now, of course. We need to pay the bills. But if you can build even one thing that is still growing in value 5 years from now, a platform, a network, a body of published work, and oh yes, we all should be authors. I don't want to go there. I don't want to digress too much, right? A reputation in a specific niche. For instance, you study marketing. Imagine making yourself an authority in a niche, a specific niche in marketing. That is what protecting space for, even when it doesn't pay immediately. Another thing is identity. This is the piece that I think matters most, and the one that almost nobody talks about, honestly. When you are holding multiple significant identities at once, you are a researcher, you are a professional, you are a founder, you are a mom, you are a partner, you are something to someone. There's a real risk of feeling fragmented, like you are slightly different, slightly incomplete person in each context, and you're never fully present anywhere because you are always trying to share yourself in different places. I felt that for a long time in academic spaces. Sometimes I felt like, that practitioner who had wandered into research world. In the professional setting, I felt like sometimes that researcher who did not quite belong among people who are purely focused on industry. So I was in between. Now that in between feeling is real, and I don't want to pretend it resolves itself neatly. What helped me most is shift in framing, like similar to what I talked about in the very first episode of this channel. You can check it out again. I stopped trying to, be one thing that simply wears different hats in different rooms. I started understanding myself as one integrated person with full range of experience, whether from the clinical aspect, from the regulatory aspect, academic, entrepreneurial, as a parent, as a partner. It's the actual asset, not a set of competing identities. Competing identities to manage or hide one piece from each other. That's not a tidy resolution. Some days the fragmentation still creeps back in. I feel it. However, the framing itself, the whole person, but with multiple expressions, rather than the fractured person wearing a mask. And that has made an enormous difference to how sustainable this season feels. So I'm bringing my whole person with different hats, not me being broken inside and wearing different masks, trying to please different communities or trying to please different aspects of my life. So if you're at the start of trying to build a real life alongside a PhD or alongside a business or a career, if family, a project of your own, whatever the version of this season looks like for you, here's what I'll tell you. Don't wait for an imaginary future session with more space to start the other things that matter to you. Now I'm going to pause here so that I'll discuss this in detail. A few weeks ago, I was talking to a PhD student, a lady that had just submitted her thesis, and we got talking, and she discovered that I had kids. And she was surprised. And of course, the first thing that came to her mind was, she actually said it. Yeah, the first thing she was like, I didn't know you were that old. Because when you tell people you have kids, and then they begin to ask about the age so that they can put two and two together and try to guess your age. But what she didn't know was that she was putting away too much of her life in trying to gain a particular thing. Look, and because she had told me that she and her partner had been together for almost a decade. And they decided to do all the academic stuff before they started having kids. Look, even if you started dating your partner at 20, by the time a decade passed, you would have been 30. If you started at 30, by the time a decade passed, you would have been 40. Do you understand? There are things that you don't just put aside for another thing to win. Because that season rarely arrives. That season of calm where everything is settled now rarely arrives. She has submitted a thesis now. She's going to get a job, hopefully, soon. And she's going to find that she's practically building all over again. Because the PhD phase, if you're not continuing in academia, the PhD phase is far different from what you're going to find in industry. So she's going to start building again. That time that she thought she was going to have to, do all those honeymoon things would not come. You have to build it deliberately while you are in the middle of that demanding season. It's not something you say, okay, let me keep first. You have to build that company while you are in the middle of that demanding season, especially if you know within you that you can make time for it. Get genuinely honest about your own energy patterns, not some schedule, some ideas copied from another person's life. I'm not a person who can work effectively at 5 a.m. no matter how many success stories they tell me about waking up early. A friend of mine has tried with waking us up at 4 a.m. to work to 6. It works. It works. It's good. It's good, but it didn't continue for me because that was her pattern. That was what worked for her. But for me, it didn't. It didn't work for me. You have to know your own actual patterns, not around someone else's productivity advice. It's what give yourself permission to be you. Give yourself permission to be one whole multi-dimensional person rather than auditioning for some narrow version of a serious doctoral student or a serious career person that was never built with a life like yours in mind. Friends, I'm closing now. I want to know, what does your version of building a life alongside this actually look like? What are you holding alongside your PhD or whatever you're building right now? Tell me in the comment section. And if this spoke to you, share with someone who has been quietly wondering if they are doing this wrong simply because their PhD or their career or their business is not the only thing in their life. Subscribe, because next in this series, we are closing this whole arc, this whole PhD arc with something different. In fact, two things. First, I'll be talking about my mid-PhD audit, what I'll be doing differently or what I'll do differently if I was enrolling in a PhD program again. Looking back, doing it right now at this exact point in my doctoral journey, and we'll also be having an interview of a senior level PhD candidate from the US. So my name is Rhoda. If you've not known, if you're joining me for the first time, please subscribe to this channel. Support me, leave your comment, be in my DM on Instagram. I'll appreciate that a lot. This is Rhoda 360, is 360 degrees of insight, inspiration, and impact. Take care of yourselves and each other. See you in the next episodes. Bye.